Welcome back, Chappelle. All right, welcome back from Cosette and Pierre. We're here hanging out on a Saturday. We're going to flip some stuff. We're going to pick right up where we left off in class when we were talking about the period known as the Pax Romana, right? So we discussed a lot of stuff in class that I had some people a little bit confused about. But after the quiz, which a bunch of y'all did super well on, which I was really impressed by, you have to understand that we had a very intense storyline, right? If you understand, though, a couple of key markers throughout this entire story, the formation of the first triumvirate, the formation of the second triumvirate, the winner of each of those civil wars, Caesar beating Pompey, and like Octavian beating Mark Antony and Cleopatra, if you understand the concept and the flow of that story, which we will review heavily over the next few days, then you are going to be just fine when it comes to this entire test, right? So getting after it, though, and understanding this huge concept, the Pax Romana would be brought in under Augustus, right? And it's going to be the reason why Rome becomes an empire with an emperor and a permanent dictator due to the fact that there was a period of large growth, right? In class, we looked at the bathhouses, we looked at the aqueducts, we looked at all these different things that actually were constructed during the Pax Romana, bringing fresh water and bringing all this kind of entertainment and bringing all this understanding and all this this healthier lifestyle to the ancient Roman people using bathrooms and plumbing and all this other stuff, right? And now a big one that we left off with, though, we might have gotten a little bit into it in your class, we might not have. I don't really know, because I usually have to record these right after C period, and I always start wherever C period left off, right? So with this, though, that right there is the Colosseum, right? Now, the Colosseum was built after Augustus was already dead, all right? So Augustus died in, I want to say 17 AD, or not AD, 17 BC. So, but I'd have to look that up. But he was followed by a number of different people that are going to become that princeps, that principate imperator person, right? That first amongst equals, which is like you're an emperor in everything but name, right? So a bunch of guys followed after him, right? He had an entire dynasty that followed after him as well. Like Tiberius, like one of his uncles took over, or like one of the uncles of his wife, like Tiberius took over after he died, right? And then after that, Caligula takes over, and multiple other people come along that actually continue to grow and grow and grow, and then actually become this like imperator or this emperor role, right? Now, one of the biggest ones were these people known as the Flavians, right? The Flavian dynasty included several different figures, two of them great, one of them awful, right? Vespasian, not Titian, that's a Renaissance artist. Vespasian, I think it's Titus, and Titus and because the Arch of Titus, we looked at that in the forum. Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian, right? But Vespasian's most famous thing he did was he created this thing, the Colosseum, right? The Colosseum was named Colosseum because it basically means Colossus, or the massive, right? Because there actually apparently was a massive statue of this guy named Nero down the street from this, but it has since been destroyed, right? So they named it basically like the Colosseum, the Colossus that goes with it. What it is a giant theater, right? It's a huge theater used for sport and these things known as games. Remember when we talked about bread and circuses? The first kind of big Colosseum was known as the Circus Maximus, but this one was dedicated to a different type of entertainment. The Circus Maximus had horse racing and chariot racing. This one, on the other hand, is going to be very different. So what you need to do in this entire little dialogue, you're going to need to write down about 4 to 5 good facts about the Colosseum. Because on the fill in the blank section on your test, it's going to ask you to give me about 3. All right? So make sure you have some ones that kind of stand out to you, though. So I'm going to keep going. So I took all of these pictures, right? That right there is my wife's finger who's pointing at something. Now, oh no, wait, that's some older lady. Like, so my wife's like standing right in front of me. But that right there is what it looks like on the ground floor of the Colosseum, right? Now, granted, it used to look a lot better. So really quick, let's jump backwards real fast, and I'll look up a picture. Colosseum when it was new. There we go. This is what the Colosseum looked like when it was fully constructed. There we go. All right, so anyway, now, so when the thing was actually fully built, it was a massive theater that had huge stands on the inside of it, and also had a huge dirt floor that could be removed at any point, and and then this is another one as well. So it was absolutely huge. Kind of looks like the Superdome in a lot of different ways, right? Now, the big thing about it, though, is like going back to the way it looks like now, as you can tell, it wasn't kept up very nicely, right? A lot of it has to do with the fact that it got hit by an earthquake at one point in 1329, but this thing right here is where the floor would have been, right? It was a giant wooden floor that was covered in sand and rock, and it was actually used for the sand and rock because it threw up dust and different things like that whenever actually they would actually use it for the main fight. The main thing that was used for were gladiatorial bouts, right? So the gladiators, what gladiators are a kind of collection of mostly slaves and some of them free men, right? Gladiators are fighters, right? They're slaves that have been given weapons that go inside of this Coliseum, and they would fight one another, sometimes till the death. Now, a lot of people are always like, oh, didn't they always die? Unfortunately, no. Only about 25% of gladiators actually ended in death. And it was usually they died because the injuries sustained from the battle were just, they couldn't, live anymore, right? And they actually had this place called the Sanatorium where they would kill them and stuff like that. It's very messed up. But the gladiators would not enter in through the front, these things called vomitoriums right here. They actually wouldn't enter in through these doorways. They entered in underneath the floor, and they were raised up on a chain stage that would bring them up to the thing to, actually fight one another, right? So as you can see, though, there are giant tunnels and different passageways and stuff that you can actually go down into. Now, this is me looking like an absolute goon in the Coliseum because apparently, remember, I don't know how to smile and I don't know how to be normal. But whatever, it's one of my better pictures. This is also just a perspective thing. So as you can see, there were multiple rows of seats as well in the Coliseum, and it could hold upwards of 10,000 people. This is another shot of the tunnels and stuff that you can actually see underneath. That is where the gladiators would actually enter in right there. So looking at this right here is really interesting. That's where the senators sat, right? You actually knew where the senators sat in the Colosseum because they sat on marble seats, right? Marble steps. And also a really cool thing is this has been added back to it as a way to show you what the floor would have looked like when you're actually sitting inside of the Colosseum. Now, the Colosseum had lots of different events, not just gladiatorial bouts. It had tons and tons and tons of other things. They would have magicians come out. They would have beast hunts, which would be really, really insane, where they would basically set up a natural scene out there with trees and rocks and other stuff like that, and they would release a wild animal out there, right? Like a lion or a tiger or something like that. They would release a wild animal that they had captured probably in the expansion of the empire in places like Africa or Asia, and they would release them out there, and then they would send a gladiator out there with only a few weapons, and the gladiator would hunt the animal in front of everybody, right? They would do that. They would have like very large theater performances and things like that. But the big one that was always very well known for was an emperor that comes up a little bit later named Nero that we'll talk about in class, but I'll bring his name up here as well. They actually were very, very famous for doing a lot of really intense stuff. Like, for example, pumping this thing full of water. Apparently they would build walls around the interior, ring, and they would pump water into it, and they would have small naval battles out there. They would actually put boats out there, and the boats would fight each other, right? And all the while, people are sitting up in the stands, flipping out, cheering, throwing money out, and actually gambling on these different fights and things like that. And that's my wife. Look how cute she is when we were in Italy. Now, that's my wife right there, and we're actually standing here on one of the second levels of the Colosseum, so you can see the entire thing the way it looks like now. This right here was the locker room that was across the street for the gladiators, where they would then actually walk underneath and pop up. And this right here is another really cool thing that I love about the Colosseum. Apparently, people would eat in the stands, and they actually use these little stoves to cook meat and stuff like that inside of the stands. They would actually bring meat in their pockets and use these little skewers and actually stick it on there and actually roast it inside of the Colosseum while they're watching the gladiatorial fights, or the gladiators, right? Gladiators is an important word that you definitely need to know. Now, also a little interesting thing, though, too, is sometimes children would take these little skewers and they would vandalize the Colosseum. And what I mean by vandalize, they would scratch into the seats the names of their favorite gladiators, or they would scratch into the seats their names, or they would draw little pictures and stuff like that, which is such a great little fact because we actually have evidence of some of these little drawings and stuff like that, and it's so amazing to know that children over 1,000 years ago were the same as kids now, right? I know I've heard about all y'all writing on the bathroom stalls, y'all quit that, but basically Roman kids did the exact same thing inside the Colosseum, scratching these different little things into the seats and stuff like that. So the Colosseum was an amazing, gigantic building that kind of demonstrates the growth of Rome during the Pax Romana, right? Because it's a huge, massive feat of architecture that most people in the Western world know what it is, and also most of all of our NFL stadiums are based off of this thing, right? So really quick though, going, and we'll review a couple of those. So if you didn't get 5 facts, leave those 5 bullet points. We'll go over them again in class a little bit. But for years after Augustus, right, during the Pax Romana, which lasted for 200 years, Rome went through a lot of really good emperors and a lot of really bad emperors, right? There were several different family dynasties. There were the Julio-Claudians, which was actually underneath Augustus and his descendants. There were the Flavians, which are the guys that actually just built that Colosseum that I was showing you. Nero right here being one of, was he one of the Flavians? Yeah, he's one of the Flavians. So the big thing about it, though, is that there were some that were particularly terrible, right? The 2 most well-known for being awful were Caligula and Nero, right? Now, we will talk about these guys specifically in class, but get both their names and leave a few lines of space underneath each of them, right? I don't want to talk about these guys on a flip because I don't feel it's good enough to talk about them on a flip. I want to talk about them to you in class so you can know how nuts these guys were, right? These guys both ended up actually being killed by their own guardsmen or their own military, right? That is Caligula, and this is Nero, right? So this one is most well known for a famous phrase of playing the fiddle while Rome burned, and this guy is one of the most famous ones for trying to make his horse a senator, right? So a lot of other really cool facts that we'll talk about them, though. And they're not alone. There were guys like Commodus and Elagabalus and Caracalla that were also really, really bad emperors. But we'll talk about them a little bit later on. But right now, we're going to focus on the last 5 emperors of the Pax Romana, also known as the 5 good emperors, right? So speaking of, we will talk about those bad emperors, like I said, in class. So leave that space in there, and we'll chat about those whenever you come back. But the 5 good emperors were very, very well known for expanding the Pax Romana and growing Rome to its absolute height. And there are 5 guys that came one after the other, right? So all 5 of these guys came in order. And notice I have 2 of them in giant bold letters. It's because they are in the matching section of your test, right? So the 5 good emperors for the Pax Romana are known for various different things. The first one that shows up, Nerva, who looked exactly like this, who came right after the Flavian dynasty, is going to show up, and basically he's only well known for the fact that he didn't mess anything up. He won some small wars in barbarian areas, and he basically didn't allow the Roman government to collapse. Yay, Nerva! You didn't mess up, right? Now, Trajan is a very, very, very famous, Roman emperor who was all about expansion, right? He grew Rome to be that giant red map that we showed you in class the one day, where all y'all didn't know where the Mediterranean Sea was, and you're like, what's the white stuff? And I was like, it's water. Now, the big thing about Trajan is he grew Rome to be gigantically large, right? All the way into Germany, all the way up into Great Britain, all the way over into all the way over into Eastern Europe, right? The Trajan expansion was so well known that he even built a huge column known as Trajan's Column to mark the expansion of the Roman territory, right? And so also funny enough, Marcus Aurelius has one of these built as well, just a little bit bigger. Now, the big thing about though is then Hadrian comes along, and Hadrian was very, very well known for limiting the expansion of Rome. So where Trajan did so great for expanding Rome and its boundaries and getting it to be as large as it possibly could, he was awesome. We appreciate him. Good for you, Trajan. He also looks like this. This is what Trajan looks like. So Hadrian, on the other hand, which is right here, Hadrian then said, that's enough. And he limited the expansion of Rome. He did not want to overextend Rome by creating this house of cards issue that could come tumbling down at any minute, right? And so what he did to do this is he built a very famous wall. That right there is called Hadrian's Wall. And that section of it is actually from the section of the Hadrian's Wall that's in England today. There's actually artifacts and pieces of it left over. And now this wall wasn't necessarily built to keep people out. It was much more used to actually just be a defensive front against any kind of barbarians or invaders, and also to mark the expansion of the empire, being like, Rome ends here, right? So Hadrian is very well known for building that wall, and it's a very good thing. And then Pius comes along, who's right here, and Pius is just very well known for going through a long-standing period of peace, where he was not trying to conquer barbarian tribes, and he was only focusing on the growth of Rome and the growth of Rome's government and stability. So these 5 good emperors are literally guys that put Rome on the map, right? They're guys that kind of threw us into history as being Rome being this very strong, yes, Josie, you're one of the 6 good emperors. Now, and growing them to be so large and prominent. She's not that bad. I mean, she's not the best, but she's not that bad. Now, stop burying into my arm. Now, anyway, so really quick though, then the last one, who's known as the best of the 5 good, this is just a butt, all right, so that is best of the 5 good emperors, is known as Marcus Aurelius, right? Marcus Aurelius is the Roman philosopher king. He is a Stoic philosopher. He believed in Stoicism, and he believes that every man only needs their intelligence and their insight to grow the prominence and help the people of Rome to be as understanding and growing like-minded as possible. He did not show a lot of emotion, and he is considered the guy that had created a stable system in Rome before his son showed up and screwed the whole thing up, right? So, but he's basically known as the philosopher king, and he is actually the most stable Roman emperor of the entire area. And we'll talk about him a little bit more in class as well. And there's, of course, the wall. And now the big thing, and there's Marcus Aurelius. Now, really quick, though, biggest things, though, that you need to know is that it does not matter how much good emperors do, because the fall of Rome is coming. And we're going to be talking about that in class and wrapping it up before our test. But the fall of Rome is very, very short, and we're going to insanely oversimplify it. So I'll talk to you guys about that stuff in class. We have a lot of stuff to review and add to your notes when you get back to class, including the Coliseum stuff, as well as the bad emperor stuff. And I know you're like, man, I didn't write much down for that. It's mainly just a way to get us kind of to a point to where we can crush this thing so you can do your test and move forward. Got it? Y'all have a great one. I'll see y'all in class. Y'all have a good one.